Hey, it's Mike Wilson again. Today we're going to go over another installment in the decoding series. This time we're going to spend a few minutes talking about marketing strategy and breaking down exactly how to put something together for your company. So hopefully you got a chance to watch our brand messaging, decoding brand messaging video, because in that, I think it kind of set the stage to help you understand a little bit better what we're going to cover in this installment. So where we ended off is that from a brand point of view, what you really need to have is a clear, consistent message that sells with personality. And that needs to be pervasive throughout your marketing and also throughout your sales process and what it's like to engage as a customer. Sometimes that's pretty difficult to do, but we'll go over kind of how to approach it. If you can't approach it top down, the other way to do it is sort of bottom up, and we'll explain that in a minute. So in the last installment, and I'm just going to go over this briefly, this is kind of the heart of the decoding model, and this is covered in the book Decoding People, which I'll give you a note on in the end. So if you understand that model, it's pretty easy to understand how this impacts our brand building. So you can see that when we look at our four-dimensional model that I cover extensively in the book, it's all about clarity, consistency, and selling with personality. So again, if you didn't get a chance to watch the other video, you might want to check it out. So how does that translate when we go into marketing strategy? Well, not surprisingly, it translates very clearly. So basically what we can do is take the same model and look at our marketing programs and our marketing approach from a strategic point of view using that same model. And the only real difference here is exactly where when we talked before, it's really what is the overall message, and what is the overall tone, and what is the overall personality, and what's the value. In this installment, we're talking about, okay, how are we going to actually get the word out? How are we going to communicate and connect with people to make that happen? So because of that, and again, this is covered in Decoding People, but the reason that we want to use the decoding model is because it is built completely around people. And people are obviously going to be the consumers who are going to buy your products or services. So if you want to reach the most number of people and do it in a way that is effective, you need to have sort of these four general elements, because these sort of talk to four different quadrants of how the model works. So for example, for some people, and you've heard this probably if you've done any marketing or selling, the question is, if you don't have clarity, the question is, why should I care about this? If you don't have consistency, people are skeptical. So they say, are you a real company? Do you have real products? So let's just take a simple example. A consumer gets one email. It's from China. The language is strange. It's hard to make a buying decision on that. Some people do. Some people get, fall victim to the spam attack. But for most people, they think, I'm not sure this is really something for real. And then obviously there's the value from a sales point of view. What am I actually getting in return for what you're offering me? And then I think another obvious but very important characteristic, and it goes to selling with personality, is can I relate to this product, brand, service, company? Is this something that feels right to me? So again, it makes pretty obvious sense now that you see it kind of from a marketing point of view, why we went over the model from a brand point of view. So the objective here, and this is one of the hardest things to do for someone inside of a company, is to think like their buyer. So let's say that you own a restaurant and you spend all your day thinking about what kind of meals am I going to cook? Do I have enough produce on hand to make the salads? Is Joe Blow going to show up and cook everything on time? You've got all these sort of operational concerns, and how are we going to get this done, and who's going to clean the tables and that kind of thing. Whereas someone walking in the door doesn't care about how you do all that. All they want to know is the meal going to be good? Is there something on the menu I want? So it's all about thinking like the buyer. And I think that's one of the core concepts in Decoding People, is we talk about how to think like other people, which is not an easy thing to do sometimes. So when you talk about marketing, what it really is, and this is true with sales as well. So this kind of covers, in the last installment, we talked about how there's some marketing myths that we wanted to kind of overcome. And this is where marketing really isn't that different than selling. Brand building is really not that different from lead generation or promotion. It's really not an art, and it's really not a science. It is predictable. The model sort of shows that. And if you kind of build the building blocks, it works out just fine. So let's walk through kind of this relationship building. So have I heard of you? So this is where you hear a lot in marketing. People talk about awareness and building awareness. And this is part of the credibility, building credibility, because like as the kind of ridiculous example I used a minute ago, it's the, have I heard of your product or have I heard of your service before? And if I've heard of it a few times, it makes it feel more credible to me. And then I think, what exactly are you selling? And is it relevant to me? So that's another part of the relationship. So this is where you really want some kind of messages that really can connect with an audience. So sometimes that comes through in personality. Sometimes that comes through in message. Sometimes that comes through in medium. We talked earlier about one of the myths being the medium is the message. Well, sort of true, but it only really connects with relevance. So for example, if I love going to picnics and you market to me at picnics, then I guess the medium is the message, right? So that's really important. And then I think this is something that people don't think through completely when they build marketing programs is what is the commitment level? What do we want you to do? And what a lot of people, and I think this comes out of consumer marketing, where it's a pretty simple, almost like a point of purchase decision. So I walk into a store, I think, which kind of paper towel am I going to buy? It's not a big decision to me. I can choose this one or this one. I might have some preference because I've heard of Bounty or something before, or I might be convinced that there's some rational reason like, it's the quicker picker upper and that kind of thing. So, but when you get to more sophisticated marketing situations, the issue really is all about commitment level. So for example, let's say that you want to promote an expensive product or service like a car, for example, or maybe like some business software or something like that. You might want to have an event. Well, that's asking someone to make a very high commitment level. So, or like let's say it's enter a drawing where someone has to fill out some information. That's a relatively low commitment level. Or let's say that you want them to read something or watch a video like this one to understand what you have to sell them. That's a little bit higher commitment level because they actually have to commit some of their time. So you as the marketer have these tools in your toolbox, and really, in my mind, you should really work between a range of offers that are sort of low commitment to high commitment. So, it could be as simple as go to our website, like us on Facebook, those kinds of actions, and it could be as complex as buy the car and that kind of thing. So so the next step, and I think this sort of speaks to that commitment level, is what are the barriers to buying? What do I have to do to get somebody to say yes? And what this typically follows is a pretty predictable pattern in that the barriers increase with the cost and complexity. So like the walking into the grocery store example, a point of purchase decision has a much lower barrier to buying than a car does, or some expensive piece of software or something like that. So you really have to convince someone more and more and more. There probably has to be more human interaction. And that's all part of the barriers to buying. With that competitive comparison, or with that barrier to buying, so let's say I walk in and it's a point of purchase decision. That's a pretty simple situation. I can evaluate my options. I've already decided I want to buy some paper towels, but now I just have to pick between the three on the shelf. Well, sometimes it's not that simple. So when you think about a car, people do a little bit more research typically. They look around at different cars. They think about, is this really the right one for me? They look at what other people have to say about it. They spend a lot more time. So I call this the considered purchase. So sometimes it's an impulse purchase, and then it ranges all the way up to a considered purchase. And so this is something that you definitely want to address during the marketing process. So in other words, you want to put yourself in the best possible light from a competitive point of view. And if you've done your work right and you've planned it correctly, then by the time someone goes to make a purchase, they're already predisposed to buy what you have to sell. Another component of it is the value component, which is this worth it to me? What do I get for what I'm offering? So, and this goes up to what do you want me to do? So a commitment level might be relatively low, like come to our website, like us on Facebook, and I get what? That's the part that most people sort of leave out on the marketing side. They just finish off their commercial saying, like us on Facebook, without any value to me. So if I get 50% off for liking you on Facebook, that has a lot more value to me. So than just doing it because you want it, I guess would be the way to put it. So there's all the way to the value of the product or service. So if it's a really high value product or service for a relatively low cost, that's kind of your best, most ideal scenario, and particularly if it's very unique from a competitive point of view. So this is what marketers, I think, are always trying to put in front of people. And then another key component is to the decision is the timing. So a lot of times, and this speaks to consistency in marketing, the timing is hard to guess. So for lower commitment offers, like, which place should I go out to breakfast, the timing just requires that you're there all the time. So, Betty's breakfast place is always in front of you, and when you think I want to go out to breakfast, Betty is one of the people that you consider going to her restaurant. Another example of something like this is if you have something that has a much longer sales cycle. So typically, if you're trying to sell to a company, this is where consistency absolutely kills you, especially competitively. So a lot of people just do consistent marketing, but it's not very strategic. And so what ends up happening is they miss the timing. And what I call this is they come in sort of late and low. So they come in late in the sales process. The decision's already been set up. The competitive comparison's already been made. And you're just sort of got a seat at the table, but you really have no chance of winning anything and selling anything. So you want to kind of avoid that. And the way to avoid that is to have a really consistent and pretty strategic program in place that walks people through a buy cycle. So we'll go over that in just a minute. And then one of the most overlooked parts of building a strategic marketing program is really helping and sort of reselling the customers you already sold. So this has opportunities in terms of selling additional products. It also has opportunities in repeat selling of the same product. So when something comes up and they need more of whatever your product or service is, if they think, wow, that was a good decision to me to walk into that restaurant, or that was a good decision to purchase that software, or that was a good decision to buy that phone or whatever, when it comes up again, your reputation hopefully will have been built through the buying process so that they look at you favorably. Obviously, it also has a lot of ramifications in terms of who they'll recommend to friends, talking about the experience. So this is what kind of generates some of the buzz and what I'd call the intangible salespeople or the unplanned for salespeople out there selling your product for you. And that's really what you want to nurture. So let's put this set of criteria all into sort of a structure so that we can start thinking about our program. So how we would actually build marketing programs. So typically this is sort of the cycle. So in general, you want some sort of level of activity that's driving awareness. So that's just getting your name or product or service in front of people, again, with that really clear, consistent message, and make sure it has a sort of a standout personality. It's great to be a dry cleaner, but if you're a dry cleaner with personality, it stands out even more, and someone remembers you exist even more. So when they think dry cleaning, which is the category of the product, they think, oh, there's that cute one with that cute little logo, or whatever your personality is for your company. And then there's what we like to call the sort of engagement aspect, or the prospect driving programs, which is they're called in more business marketing. But this is where you really are trying to put some tangible things in front of people to help convince them that you're relevant, that you're the best choice for them, and then any objections or things that you come up consistently that you want to overcome in advance, so that by the time they're really ready to buy something from you, they don't really even have to think about it. It's an easy purchase for them. Then there's when the customer actually purchases something from you. And the quality of that experience, so let's take a simple example, which is like, let's say it's an online experience. And this is why e-commerce companies really work hard to recommend you other things. They work hard to keep information about you. They want to make that experience as quality as possible so that you'll come back and buy another thing at that same website. So you really want to make the experience a good experience, an easy experience for the buyer, something that they look forward to, or that they're at least not, they object to. So if it's a kind of a painful experience to buy it, a painful experience to implement it, or whatever, depending on the kind of product you're talking about or service you're talking about, they associate that pain, that buying pain, and what a hassle or whatever it was with whatever you're selling. So you want to minimize that as much as possible. So a lot of your marketing can be around that, follow up, post-purchase, that kind of thing, just to keep yourself and get a feeling for what your customers really, what the experience really is like. And then obviously the ideal situation is that your customers fall in love with what you do, your company, your product, your service, and the experience is something great that they either want to replicate or tell other people about. So that's kind of the ideal scenario. So really what you want to do is think about your entire buy cycle, like how people buy from you, and examine each area of it from when they don't know you to when they do know you, and ask yourself, how well are we doing in each area, both from a marketing and message point of view, and then also from an operations and delivery point of view. And obviously you want to keep improving. That's one of the key concepts in the decoding model, is that you want to always be improving. That sort of incremental improvement is what really makes a difference. So mistakes are made, things happen, or there are lapses in products or services or marketing, but you want to try and improve consistently as much as you can. So execution, and this is, again, sometimes people sort of are spotty with their execution in terms of marketing strategy. Often they don't really think about it as a disciplined activity. It's sort of like, well, we need something to go out in a week and we're going to do this, and we're going to do a quick promotion for this, and it'd be great because we're doing that and we have a special and da-da-da. And it's very, I don't know, sort of unplanned and often need driven. So a lot of times we need to increase sales, so quick, let's do something. It works much more effectively if you build basically an annual program with goals, specific goals that you want to try and achieve. Sometimes these are very simple to start with, just simple concepts that you want to put at least on a piece of paper so that you have some sense of what you're really trying to do. Also, you want to say, we're going to commit some level of budget to marketing. A lot of times people just go in and say, and look at it as an expense, like I want to sell as little as possible. Or I want to market as little as possible and spend as little as possible. Well, that's a good strategy, especially when you're unsure. The only issue that you want to do is you want to make sure that whatever your sales process is, you start to really figure that out, figure out what makes you unique, and then hopefully you can scale that budget up as you bring in, as it's more successful. So the model is you want to prove it on a smaller level and then expand it. I think this is also a good approach if you're not sure how to craft an overall brand concept or a brand message. Sometimes what works better is just to try a bunch of marketing tactics until you sort of hit some things that start to resonate with your customers, and then make that sort of bottom up. So I mentioned earlier the top down versus bottom up. Sometimes it's easier to plan, sometimes it isn't. But what you want is the goal to be the same, which is that you get to that consistent message somehow. So sometimes you can use marketing almost like research to figure out, does this work versus that? Does that work versus this? Often I even use it in sales scenarios so that you can try out different messages at different times with people and see how they respond to them right in person. That's pretty effective as well. So anyway, the way I like to recommend planning is that you start with some basic annual goals. You break that down quarterly as a business. So you say, okay, we're going to do this level of promotions within a quarter. This is what we're going to promote. And then obviously that breaks down into some sort of weekly plan of tactics. So, on Tuesday the 4th, we're going to do this. And on, Wednesday the 19th, we're going to do that kind of thing. And that helps sort of drive your schedule and your deadlines. A lot of times people do it in reverse. They just sort of set an arbitrary marketing deadline and then try and meet it. And sometimes it's strategic, sometimes it's not. It's kind of helter-skelter. So one of the things that I think is really endemic and an issue in marketing as a whole is this sort of deadline-driven approach where it's not very strategic. And so I think one of the issues with that is that when you take that approach is stuff gets done. That's the good news. The bad news is that none of your customers were waiting for that program to happen or that marketing effort to happen. They don't care when it is or how it is typically. And so unless you're driven by a very specific, for example, the cycle like the retail cycle, for example, there's really no point in doing it. And honestly, the trying to cut through the noise even in a cycle like that without much planning is pretty difficult to do. You really want to be educating your potential prospects and customers throughout the year so that, when they hit the cycle times that you need to meet certain numbers or whatever, they're you've already sort of built the groundwork. You've set things in place to be successful. So anyway, hopefully that was helpful. Just giving you a quick overview. Obviously, these concepts are covered in more detail and applied more broadly in the book Decoding People. And also, we're working to put together some tools and templates and other things on ID34.com. So hopefully by the time you're watching this video, there'll be more available to you to help you out. Thanks again.